So, and we are live. Wow. kind of impressive.
Made it.
Yeah. That is, sometimes it's easier said than done, as they say. But I'm kind of glad we managed, I have to say. Welcome back to what is another episode of PKs on the Air with, again, a slightly different setup. Corona distanced, but we managed to finally get it all done in our very own studio. So I think that's an improvement. Yeah, you can't even imagine what struggle that is sometimes. But well, if you're dealing with tech, then I suppose you have all been there and done that one way or the other. But yeah, so at least it made us grin in sometimes what are crazy times. Anyhow, Dominique, welcome back. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Was funny last hour. I would say everything in terms of the setup for today. A lot of learnings and funny situations, but yeah, everything is fine. I'm having 3 days off in front of me.
I'm so jealous. You have no idea.
So this is my Friday today. So
to me, it feels like Friday as well, I have to say. So clearly, I think that is it's not too far off from the truth. But hey,
true.
Anyhow, so we have a bit of. We thought it would be good because there were a lot of things actually happening during October. A whole bunch of different things, relatively broad variety of things around. Organic search or things around organic search, either way, where we thought it would be good to kind of like at least give you a bit of an update on our highlights content-wise. There were some videos actually, some other pieces that have been released. So yeah, this is why going to be this week's an update episode, and then we kind of go back to the regular detail or let's say focused kind of one specific thing per episode. Before we get into it, what was your highlight of the short week? Do you have anything worth sharing? I think we have one content piece that you said, well, that was really something that you enjoyed at the New York Times.
Oh, yeah. That was my highlight,
I would say. That was your highlight. Okay, fair enough.
Definitely, because I was super suppressed in the technical implementation of that content piece. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, not sure. I think that's it.
That's it.
To be honest,
yeah. I was. I have to say I was really impressed by the amount of info that somewhat made it to light just in like the last 5-7 days. So wouldn't say necessarily a highlight of this week in general, but for whatever reason, I don't know. It feels like everyone is publishing stuff.
Like educational content,
yeah, and some really good things where we kind of gonna deep dive in a bit later, I would say. Quick housekeeping notes as always. Show notes from last week's episode are on our website, so pa.ag/notes, where you find, like always, the most recent episode, including a whole bunch of like follow-up material, some of the infos like links that we kind of covered during the show is also going to be there. So yeah, make sure you head over if there's anything that is amiss. And we're going to do, of course, the same for this week, because there's a whole bunch of links that we will be covering. So I'm trying and see if my Chrome browser likes me this week, but it looks like it at least. Even though that thing looks slightly weird, but I'm gonna check in a second why that is the case. So yeah, I thought it would be good to go through a couple of things and just give you a quick heads up on some of the things that have been happening in the last week, and maybe discuss some of those as well. And one thing I just wanna, because that would already been the end of the episode if we watch the video now. But Google released actually a quite interesting video mid of October, I think, 16th, called Trillions of Questions, No Easy Answers. That's at home movie about how Google search works. And I think actually that is somewhat true. I mean, it's insane. Like, it's literally close to an hour. But I have to say there is a high density of information in there. And it looks like it has been like partially produced before the Corona lockdown, and then some probably during. So I assume it has been in the making already for also quite a while. Nevertheless, though, I feel there's a really, really depth and wealth of info in there. So recommendation here would be to spend your next weekend wisely. I think, I mean, as the title says. But yeah, it's definitely worth watching. So it's on the Google YouTube channel, and we will be adding it, of course, as well to the show notes. I assume you have not had the time to watch it yet, right?
Not the full video.
Okay, yeah.
I had a update call with our team leads, with our SEO team leads yesterday, and we have spoken about this video.
Yeah.
I just watched like 30 minutes until now.
Half. Okay.
Yeah, at least. And we shared it with the team and received a lot of good feedback, and the video also made it to our PK's Academy to our internal academy, because I think it's a very good start. So whenever we have like onboardings with new managers here in our team, we start with giving updates and an overview in general, and so therefore I think it's pretty good, at least what I've seen so far.
And I think it's also like what you're saying is something that we sometimes always seem to struggle a bit with. It's like the more generic info, right? So as you said, it gives a good kind of like higher level entrance, I would say, into the topic. So yeah, definitely worth watching. Set some time aside, and then it's really worth going there. The next topic I want to touch on is also a quite interesting one. And I would say equally confusing maybe. And that was Google's announcement on what's called passage-based indexing, or indexing of passages. And it's really a bit strange. Again, that info came out like roughly 2 weeks ago, where they kind of first announced it, combined with a whole bunch of other like updates to search. And I think the main confusion stems from the fact that it's not really so much about indexing, but rather more about ranking. And then, well, the result of ranking obviously being, what you will find when searching for a certain term, right? And there's a relatively thorough write-up on Search Engine Land, as always, where, and also probably worth noting, is it's for now it's mainly or only for English languages, or will be rolled out for English languages, as well as so rough impact around 7%, I believe, of the queries was mentioned there. So it is quite severe, and the probably broader concept behind it is that essentially what Google will be doing in the future is not only looking at the content of a full web page, but rather be able kind of to extract a certain, as it says, passage that can be like a paragraph or a phrase or a block of content, either way, and then somehow use this and rank that specific part additionally, so it's like an add-on signal to the regular page, and therefore you might be able to kind of get more precise results. So that is what it really is. What it is not, and I think this is where the kind of confusion stems from, is that it's not that they now go and say, well, we take this one specific section from a website and put that let's say isolated into the index, right? Just like we take the phrase, which the name somewhat assumes or like suggests, is like we take a section, we put the section there, and then you rank only for that section. This is not what it is. What it is basically we still have the page. We are somewhat, and there's another follow-up article we're going to talk about in a second, but like where we basically are in a position to kind of understand and share and use that to kind of to share additional like ranking signals on top of that. So the idea, at least for now, I suppose, is to make it kind of, well, let's say use it to make it more precise. I think this is probably what it describes in the most accurate fashion, and I think it somewhat ties into the context of like Google looking more at entities that are like somewhat isolated from like the grand scheme of the web page in general. So there's also like some kind of examples in the article where it says, well, so there's a very specific sentence that someone searched for, like, so how can I determine if my house get Windows R UV glasses? And then so there's like before is like a more generic answer or section to it, and then all of a sudden that the machine is basically able to understand like a certain passage on that specific page is probably more relevant, and this is kind of what's happening. And I think it's also just one of the things where it points toward the direction where Google is more and more looking to, return separate entities when they match to a certain query, right? And I think equally true is, the entirety around schema, which is also somewhat based on entities, right? Or entities based on schema, depending on how you want to turn it. Plus, Google's kind of mission towards like, well, we kind of want to get rid of the URL in search results where there were some tests, right? And also we have it in Chrome, right? So in Chrome, the URL is also like slightly disappearing. I mean, now they introduced at least the option to have them back visually, but I think this is all the trend that somewhat points into, I would say, at least the same direction. So quite interesting. Curious how it looks like in real world, but don't get confused with the word or the term indexing. In this case, it's more like a ranking situation and not so much separate indexing in that regard. And this is also what the article clarifies. Right? We asked Google if there are no indexing passage or sections of a page, and Google is not, right? So Google is still indexing full pages, but the systems will then consider the content meaning of passages when determining what's most valuable. So yeah, if you think about it, that means like they take a section and that might have like different weighting or something. So yeah, more ranking than it is actually indexing.
Cool. I think we already have the first question.
What did I do? Mr. Hellemans is also watching. So let's see if we can get this. Arnold, I hope you're well, by the way.
Hi.
So yeah, quick question towards performance, which actually ties into one of the topics that I want to touch on later anyways. But yeah, let's do that. Let's do that now. So AVIF as a new format, I think super exciting. We have a test case right now. It's not rolled out live, but it does work really well. There's an article, I think I tweeted that probably like 2-3 days ago, where the implementation was similar to what we've done in the past with WebP. So basically just checking, if the device understands, the content type, and if so, then you serve the one format, and if not, you serve like the fallback. You can also use the picture element, but again, results look quite promising because essentially, again, more than 20% savings compared to WebP, and more significantly, of course, towards JPEG, more than 50%. So quite severe, and I think definitely worth playing. I can share and will share the link to the guide that I've used for that, but really cool and ties nicely. So thanks for the question, Arnold. Ties nicely into another topic that we also have on the agenda, which is not this one, but there's another one, and I'm not sure if I can find it now quickly, but let me see where it is. Well, I'll find it in a second, but basically there was a great article around the core web vitals, and I think, yeah, no, I got it. So there's kind of study and or some deep dive into data by the guys over at Impression in the UK. And what they did is they kind of used the free available data from kind of Google's Crooks database, and it kind of checked that against the kind of 3 core web vitals. So like, I think we've been talking about that in the past a bit, Google introducing this, well, set of 3 metrics, if you so will, where they say, well, this is essentially for us crucial on how we want to measure the kind of the performance or the satisfaction at both, probably when someone interacts with a website. And essentially what they did is, it's quite cool, so you can probably poke around. So they looked at, of course, like largest contentful paint, first input delay, and CLS. So essentially those 3 core web vitals. And then they used a whole bunch of like large media publications all over the globe. As I said, against like the user experience data. And then you have some really nice charts and results here. And what it kind of comes out is that, especially in publishing, and I think this is not really unexpected, but especially when it comes down to, for example, layout shifts, then they have significant problems because of especially advertisement, right? So the implementation is poorly done sometimes, and sometimes not, at least in a way that it prevents the shift. And therefore, like, a lot of stuff is jumping around. And therefore, what they are arguing is that, eventually that industry might be hit harder than others because of the fact that they have advertisement, and therefore advertisement causes that CLS, which makes sense. It's a relatively long article, but worth poking around. So with a bit of conclusion and also Google's official stance, even though I somewhat think that we will only really know when it's there, in the sense of, like, we don't know what the direct impact is going to be, and if that's really a severe impact or if it's tiny nitty-gritty as we had it with, in the beginning when they switched to HTTPS and all of those things. So yes, it's going to be a ranking signal, and yes, I think it's also the right kind of mantra to like continue down that path, but it is questionable in my mind how severe the impact actually is going to be. So we shall see. But I mean, you can probably confirm, right? We have a lot of like inquiries currently around, like, we need probably an audit to understand where we are. A lot of people are not really even familiar with, what's the setup, what are the implications, what is going to impact the CLS and whatnot. So I would imagine that this certainly is something that's going to continue. Yeah. Right.
Cool.
Let's have a look at the New York Times content piece that you suggested. There we go.
All right. I hope it works now.
Let's see. I start scrolling, right? I think this is what the magic was. So
yes. So this is something I found just I think yesterday or on Sunday, which I found quite interesting. It's an animated landing page where it's about the functionality of Corona masks, which I found pretty cool. I mean, the technical implementation, I'm not pretty sure if it's done like perfectly, but this is what I found super interesting, not only about the topic of Corona, but of how to make some super complex topics easy to understand for everybody. I mean, this is super large and super long, but what I found extremely interesting. Can you scroll up again? Yeah. To the no, a bit below, please. A bit down.
I'm scrolling.
Yeah, it should be there, I guess. Yeah, there you have a QR tag. Which navigates you over to Instagram. And what they did on top of the landing page is a filter integration for Instagram, where you then have like the mask in your image, of course, which gives you a bit more infos about
that's super smart. Like that's an interesting use case for QR codes where everyone says they're dead anyways. But I think sometimes, in rare occasions, there's even a use for a QR code.
In that case, it makes totally sense because I always have like the same mindset. Why do we have like those QR codes? But in this case, it makes totally sense and navigates you over to Instagram. And as we've seen, that Instagram filters can have such a huge impact also on your success on Instagram. In that case, it will not bring them a lot of followers, I guess. But if you are or would be like a company who sells like super complex products in the field of beauty, let's say, it would be also super helpful here. And I found it pretty interesting.
Quite engaging just to scroll through and then just like stop when there's more info and really, really nicely done. Even though I don't know, probably our IT guys might have a different take on that, but it doesn't look crazy complicated. But well, anyhow, it's really nicely done, and it's quite easy to use, right?
Yeah. Definitely.
Very nice.
I wouldn't want to see the mobile version of that one, but
have you tested it yet?
No, not yet. No.
It crashed your browser.
Yeah,
earlier,
that's
right?
why.
So maybe not a good idea. So we shall see how that goes. But really cool.
At least the idea is great, right?
Is great, yeah. So we're gonna share that one as well. Like I think from an inspirational point of view, that probably is really also worth checking it out. All right. So what else do we have on the agenda? So there is another, and that's what I meant with massive or a lot of content. So Dawn Anderson, hi, by the way, if you're watching, Dawn, hope you guys are coping well in the UK as well. It's a beast. Let's put it that way. It sort of ties into what I've been saying with passage indexing and way more in depth. It's probably, again, so the one thing is an hour to watch. This might be an hour to read, maybe not entirely an hour, but at least if you want to comprehend it in its entirety. Super, super valuable, and I would say probably the guide right now. How does it tie together and Dawn has been talking a lot about BERT in the past and also some of the other like machine learning as well as various infos and sessions around document retrieval, etc. So, if you're into that, and you should be as an SEO, then I would strongly recommend that you have a read just for the sake of scrolling a bit. This is really... I'm not kidding when I was saying this is an hour's worth of content.
It is an hour.
Very, very thorough, well done. So probably also shout out from our side. Thanks for taking the time.
Also a must read for our SEOs on our team. So
again, absolutely. Because what I really enjoy is that it's not only like the high level fluff, so no offense there, but really in depth. Very well researched. So shout out there, definitely worth checking out. Staying with a bit more technical SEO, just for the sake of, just because we can, right? There was our friends over at Ryte, Marcus and Izzy, did quite interesting session with none other than Fabrice from the Bing crawling and indexing team, and I would agree. As he said, it was brilliant. I would agree. There was some really interesting takeaways, and at least one specifically, this is why I have it here, left me slightly confused. I would say so. What was really interesting is, if you just go quickly through the series of tweets that she put together. So first takeaway was, CTR can be used to determine relevancy for a query if a query is perceived to require clicks for satisfaction and therefore will affect rankings. I think that makes sense. So, and I would say it's not conceptually not new, but it's great to have that kind of confirmation really. And I think also keep in mind that, of course, this is why I think Izzy put it there as well, like, only if a query is perceived to require clicks for satisfaction, right? This is not always the case. If you have solely and purely informational queries, then CTR is not the right thing, because if Google can answer that straight away, well, they most likely will if they have understood that it's just an informational query. I mean, we've been talking about that in the past as well a lot, kind of how to deal with that. Is it featured snippets? What's the strategy around there? How should the content look like? I mean, I know that you guys are doing a lot of work around that as well, right? So like recommendations in terms of length and et cetera, et cetera. So I think this is the big if, only if a query is perceived to actually require this measurement. But for those where they can't answer, I think CTR, as Izzy said, makes a lot of sense. And this is also really interesting, ties in quite nicely. So the second takeaway was that featured snippet satisfaction can be measured by how it reduces a SERP's CTR. So conceptually, that essentially means that, well, if the featured snippet is the right answer, then what would happen is for all the remaining results, that CTR should go down if it's the right featured snippet that they are showing. Because if it's not, then some people are probably skim reading it, going through it, well, no, this is not the right thing, and then click on the next or next whatever listing, right? So if the featured snippet is great, then overall the click through or click out from a Google perspective, I would say, is then a good indicator, right? So again, increased CTR via the featured snippet may increase your chance of losing it. That makes sense, but really interesting. Again, good confirmation to have. What doesn't surprise me, though, with a bit of a grin, I have to say, is links matter less for Bing than they do for other search engines. I think they're saying that they do for Google, but hey. Either way, and maybe it's only because Bing is not really great in dealing with links, but what do I know? I guess either way is true. Fair enough, but yeah. The fourth one, Bing is aiming to assist a shift for how webmasters get new and updated content crawled and indexed, rather than crawling the vast web to discover changed content, which can be very inefficient. I think we talked about that in the past as well. Like crawling is extremely expensive. They wish to rely more on their easy-to-use indexing API. Well, what most people don't know is that Google has actually an indexing API as well. It is labeled as indexing API for jobs, but I think if you potentially have been at one of the other conferences that I've been spoken in the past, I think specifically earlier this year when there were still real conferences, but also last year at SEO.com, I believe, we've been showing that, well, it's called indexing API, but you can essentially use it to index essentially way more. So yeah, quite interesting there. Again, maybe also Bing has just to deal with significantly smaller volumes. I mean, if Google would roll out that API to the public entirely, I think they should be very, very sure that this actually works. And I can imagine from some conversations that I had in the past, also with some Googlers, that scale is quite severe. So that API is probably not as easy to get done, right? And then, which ties in, and this is the one that really stood out for me, content removal. When it comes to proving that deleted, broken, or old content should be removed from the index for Bing, the process is sped up by simply 301ing those URLs to the homepage, rather than providing a 404 or a 410. And this is really weird, for me at least. And there were some comments. I'm opening this quickly. So 301 to the homepage equals 404. I assume domain to domain is an exception. And then 301 over a 410. Really, this seems really weird. Wow, this sounds very odd to me. That was my reaction as well. It's a bit contrary to what we've been doing in the past. The argument I can imagine that's behind there is that of course, specifically, I guess, for 404s, not so much for 410s. For 410s, I don't really understand it, to be very honest. But for 404s, the argument could be that, well, they can also happen by mistake. So, for that, they would just go and recrawl and make sure that it's really meant to be an error, right? And then maybe recrawl it again and recrawl it again, which is somewhat the same as what Google is doing in their behavior. But I found it really strange to say, well, let's just do a 301 to the homepage. I mean, signal-wise, I can understand it in a way that, well, it's so different, and it's the homepage, and we know the homepage, then we can just treat it differently and get rid of it. I don't know. Maybe worthwhile following up with, but that really stood out because I didn't fully understand why you would be implementing it in that way. Let's put it that way. Yeah, that was, but nevertheless, it was really cool. Definitely worth watching. A bunch of info in there. The other thing that we quickly wanted to touch on is 7 questions that 7 questions that every digital PR wants to ask a journalist, and that's up over at rebootonline.com. And well, yeah, I think you would probably be able to relate, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Or not only you, but also the team in its entirety, right?
Yeah.
What's your thought on that piece? Was there anything surprising in there, or no? I mean, there was a whole bunch. Just to maybe do a quick summary, and then we can go in a bit deeper. Like, so they asked basically a bunch of reporters around the globe, right? So from the BBC, from the Sun, Standard, Observer, Telegraph. So in this case, obviously UK focused, but nevertheless, really strong names. So kudos for that. And then there was a whole bunch of like different questions.
Exactly.
7, right? So what do you hate seeing in a pitch? And what's the preferred time of the day when you read email pitches and all of that. So what's your take? I mean, first and foremost, maybe what I'm curious about. Are these the questions that you are wondering as well? Where you think, well, this might be something entirely different. I would have asked X, Y, Z, or where you said, well, this is somewhat airtight. I would agree.
I would say that pretty much ties into what I would have been interested in. I mean, anyways, we have been asking that kind of questions many times to our contacts and networks, because this is something we are interested as well. And I mean, the article starts with, there are so many questions. Everybody wants to know what journalists really want to see. We were super creative and just asked them. So that's I think the right way to just ask them. I found the questions are super interesting. The answers were not that surprising, I must say. I was pretty curious to see if there are now any major differences. I mean, we working a lot on seeing differences on different markets, especially between the UK and Germany, whenever it comes to outreach. And I must say that pretty much matches with what we have seen in the past.
And also what you talked about in the last episode, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, not that much surprising answers. So maybe.
And somewhere also, like, this is the one that I opened now, like, we're a bit vague, right? So, I mean, how far ahead do you plan your pieces to publish? Is it not coming over? No, it's coming. So the headline was, how far ahead do you plan your pieces to publish? It entirely depends, right? And 2 to 4 weeks is also a pretty broad variety. And then the next one says a week ahead. So
I mean, that pretty much also depends on which kind of journalist you are. So is it more the news section? Is it the lifestyle section? What kind of magazine is it where you're working for? With? And so I can confirm that it pretty much depends on, it's something between 2 or 4 weeks in advance planning, like the content periods or content plans.
So 2 should be the minimum then.
So 2 should be the minimum. What I'm missing here, or what I was surprised not to see, that there are always like spontaneous gaps for this is what I've talking about 2 weeks ago, I think, where we have spoken about content outreach and international outreach. That there's always a small gap for news and news checking campaigns and news checking headlines. So not everybody is, of course, planning their content or articles 2 or 4 weeks in advance. So that would have been maybe a good additional information, I would say. But so it depends again.
So and then what I'm curious about, of course, is how often do you ask?
Of course.
So to add a link on pieces you publish, and what's your policy?
Also here, not that surprising. I mean, I think all of them answered that that the decision is made by the online editor and not by the journalists, but we are always in touch with the journalists. So that is a problem, of course. So the journalist cannot decide on which kind of link is being set there. Is it a follow link? Is it no follow or whatever? So it's the online editor, and I would always suggest to take a look on outgoing links on those magazines, because then you have the answer and know before you get in touch with them.
But I think also there's two things that I think again is not surprising here, and the one is, it's they're more likely to link to brand. Kind of, I would say, non-commercial pages, obviously. And the second one is, I would say, the kind of relevance to the article and or to the readers. I think this is stuff that we've been saying a lot in the past, and no surprise there. But as you said, it's kind of an interesting and good confirmation to have.
Definitely,
so
definitely.
Nothing crazy I learned, but I've found that makes sense. Been there, done that. We have seen that. And as you said, and this is one of the summaries here, give journalists reason link to data, asset, whatever. And I think most of the campaigns that we do these days are kind of data driven or asset driven either way, where this is actually a quite nice tie-in into exactly that, right?
Definitely, and build content which is bigger than just a headline or just editorial content, right? So if you have valuable content landing pages or content at all, wherever it is, make sure that there is enough data or different kind of content assets that it makes sense for journalists, or that they have the opportunity to build their own story out of it. And
then there's two quick more just housekeeping notes or posts worth mentioning that Google kind of pushed out in the last days. So this one's actually quite old. I think we covered it in one of the very early episodes because it had some COVID tie-in. So the sunsetting support for data vocabulary that was originally posted earlier this year, very in the beginning, and then they kind of took the decision to postpone it due to the crisis, and now that's in effect. So it's going to happen early next year. I again don't think that you should be much relying on data vocabulary anymore anyway. So if you're doing any type of structured data, it's probably schema and JSON linked data. So do that and you're not affected in the first place. But I think that's just as a quick reminder, if you are, and I mean, of course, we know, especially for larger organizations and sites, that stuff is still be there. The other one is, and I found that quite interesting as well. There was another of those posts that, again, I think we also talked about in the past a couple of times when they released some best practices around what the local businesses should do when when COVID hit. So this time it's more best practices around Black Friday, Cyber Monday. So essentially seasonal pages. I think this is probably more the accurate title. And it's a couple of no-brainers in there. I mean, stuff like get the page on early, of course. Otherwise, they can't crawl it, they can't rank it, etc., etc. SEO best practices. I mean, it's good at Google pointing them out again as well. Linking, of course, reoccurring URL. I recall we had in the past often the funny situation that especially larger e-coms didn't reuse their Christmas URLs, and they were always wondering why they didn't rank the hell for any Christmas articles they were selling. Because they established new URLs all the time, and they were not properly internally linked and whatnot. So reoccurring URLs should be a no-brainer, but I'm always surprised how they are not. And one thing, and this is also the other thing that I, as an addition to the question you got earlier, include relevant high-quality images, and then especially the last sentence here says, for additional guidance on image quality, review the Google Images best practices as well as the image web fundamentals. And there's a whole bunch of interesting stuff in here that ties around image optimization. And if you've been at any of my web performance talks in the past, always a significant topic around web performance is imagery and how to make images really fast. Just in preparation for actually, I'm not sure, was it SEO day? I don't know. Well, I've been building decks so in the last days, weeks, and nights.
I think it should be SEO day.
I'm not sure if it was only for SEO day, but anyways. So I looked at specifically images as well, again, and one number that really stuck in my head was that the average web page currently loads roughly 1 megabyte per page on imagery, according to the archive.org data, which is really a lot of imagery. So yeah, I think there's a reason for why Google is actually pointing towards images. Then there's a whole bunch of other things as well, right? So that could be lazy loading, there could be compression and whatnot. So there's a lot of topics, but yeah, I think they do that. They absolutely do that for a very good reason. So I suppose, well, if you do any type of web performance things, or whatever it is you're doing in terms of performance, images are certainly a way to, or a thing to deal with first, I would say. So that said, I think that's pretty much it for our organic recap of October. I hope I didn't miss anything, but there were so many things. I hope
think
not.
That's it.
I think that's it. Well, if you say so, then I will obey. And I think we leave you guys for, well, I leave you for vacation, which is well deserved and a shame at the same time. But I leave the rest of you for fantastic remainder of the week, and we will be back next week, same date, same time, so 4 p.m. German time, with another episode of PKs on Air. So cool. Have a great week.
See you next week.
Cheers. Bye-bye.